It's Brock here from Rock Hill Farms, and today I'm going to try to figure out a better way of storing and moving my backhoe. So I've been talking for the last couple weeks about the fact I'm going to build a new storage system down in my equipment shed for 3-point attachments. And the backhoe is unique among all the other rear implements because you can't just pick it up with the 3-point or with a quick hitch on the front end loader and just easily move it. It's not set up to move like that. And I know that people buy or make little carts to roll it on a concrete floor, but that doesn't help me. I need to be able to put it into my shed, and then in certain situations I might need to take it back out and just set it out in the yard or move it onto a different area. And so I'm going to build something that serves a couple purposes. One is to be able to move it around easily. The second purpose is, if you've got one of these backhoes, you know that they sag. The cylinders bleed off. Just like if you leave your front end loader up in the air, over time it's just going to droop down and eventually be setting on the ground. It's the same thing with these. You have your instructions for removing and installing the backhoe right here. It tells you to orient the backhoe in a stable position, and then you remove it. And the theory is that when you come back to pick it up, it'll be in that same position, but it won't. Typically, the bucket begins to release pressure and curl in, and then the boom loses pressure and it sags out. And what happens, that lets the backhoe do this. Then the backhoe frame lifts off the ground. You can no longer drive over it to hook it up. I've already made one video, and there's a couple other videos out there of different ways to get that lifted back up. Sometimes I use the hydraulics on the backhoe to raise that back up. I've seen people use a floor jack. It's not convenient. What I want is to build something that doesn't allow that to sag, so that when I want to hook up, I can just hook up. Then I also want it to have access to drive in with the pallet forks on the loader and pick the whole thing up and move it anywhere I need to. And I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to accomplish that, but I have kind of a general idea in my head of how it'll work, and I'm going to give it a try. So let's get started. Before I really get started, I think I'll grease the backhoe and the front end loader. I haven't done that in a little while. So every time I maintain the equipment on camera, I mention this. It's called a lock and lube. Push that button right there. The tip opens up and then locks down on the grease zerk. Makes it much easier and much more efficient to actually get the grease where it's supposed to go. So I'll put in the description the lock and lube and a link for the Dewalt grease gun that I really like. So this thing is covered in grease zerks. I keep thinking I found them all, then I look around and find another one. To hit everything, you're going to have to articulate the stick and the boom out to get access. I can see a couple of them right now that I can't get to without dropping this down. Alright, so I just moved the backhoe into the position that John Deere tells you to put it in for removal. That is with this pin right here in front of this part of the frame, and these instructions are right on it. If you've got it, you already probably know this. But I put this pin in here. I've got this completely vertical, and then I have the bucket flat. And if you look at it, it makes sense. Your backhoe subframe and your bucket are on plane with each other at the same height. It'd give you a stable place to sit. The issue is it won't stay like that. Most things that are hydraulic won't just sit in one position and not sag at all. So they could have put some pins in here that you use to lock it in place, and that would have helped, but it still wouldn't allow me to transport it. So I could use this configuration right here and build my cart with it set up like this. But if you look, that has the backhoe stretched out, and it makes it take up more space. And I think it would be harder in this configuration to keep it from sagging, which is the original problem. So I think I'm going to set mine up a little different for storage. I'll go ahead and start the tractor up get it reoriented, and then show you what I'm talking about. So, I have it in what I would call the fully retracted position. This is in as far as it will go. This is curled as far as it would go. It's as tightly packed as it can be. So now I feel like if I build a platform that this rests on when it's fully retracted and has a stop behind it, there's not going to be any way for it to sag. And for that to be true, I also need to have a point up here that's blocked in so it can't spread out or this can't slide forward. So that's what I'm shooting for. So next thing I'm going to do is set the backhoe off of the tractor onto the shop floor so that I can take measurements of how I'm going to build this. Because it's one thing to know how to build a box to support it, but you also have to have access to drive onto it to pick it up. So I'm going to go ahead and get it set in the floor. And what's going to happen when I set it in the floor is it's not going to be supported by anything. And so as soon as I set it down, it's going to try to fall backward. And I'm going to have to hold it in the level position to build my box. To me, the easiest way to hold it would be to take this off, drive the tractor out, turn it around, drive it back in, and set the loader on it. And that would hold it in place while I build my box. The only problem with that is what's going to hold it while I am moving it. So I think what I'm going to do is set it down, but before I drive out from under it, put a floor jack under this to keep it from sagging, and then I'll still come around and put the loader on it so it'll be held from the back and from the front. I can do the majority of building my structure, and then I'll have to take the floor jack out. But that's the plan. Who knows if it'll work out the way I envision it. But I'm usually pretty stubborn and pretty sure at the end of the day I will have found a way to do this. Alright, well I accidentally had the camera off whenever I let this down. But I put my jack under this pivot point right here. I put a 4x4 block under there so it would fit the width, and raised it up until it was just a few inches below, and then I dropped the backhoe, and it accomplished exactly what I wanted it to. That the backhoe frame is setting flat on the concrete. This is held in a position that it can't sag, and now I can back the tractor out, turn it around, and I'm going to set the entire loader on the front part of this frame so that I'm not trusting that jack to hold this in place while I work. Alright, so when I started the intro for this video, I had no idea how I was going to build this. Hadn't really even given it any thought. I just said, I want to be able to move this with the pallet forks. I'm going to build something. Turned on the camera. And so I've been sitting here looking at it and say, to move this, what do you have to support? You know, what does it have to look like? So basically, I'm going to build a pallet under it, but the pallet cannot go under the front part. Because if you had a pallet under the front, you wouldn't be able to drive the tractor back over it. And I don't want something that I can move it with, but then I have to lift it off of that to put it on the tractor. So, the points that have to be supported, number one, you have to have a post or something really solid underneath the bucket. Point number two, you have to have something go on top of this bar right here. Point number three is support under the frame right here. And in my mind I was thinking, well, that's all you need. You got it that held up so it can't tip like it normally does. But if I'm lifting it from the back end with forks, there's nothing to stop it from lifting the other way. So it also needs some support to keep it from tipping like this when I pick it up. And so I think I'm going to build support that goes across the top of this. I happen to have a bunch of 4x4 treated lumber and some 2x4 and some 2x6 treated lumber and some stake pockets. I had these long galvanized carriage bolts from my carry-all build projects and my storage shelving projects. So I'd say I've got probably 3/4 of everything I'll need to do this. So I'm going to start putting it together, and then I won't be surprised if I still have to stop and go pick up a couple things, but we've got enough to get started. So if you think of this like a pallet, and these be your side supports for the pallet, you're normally going to have 1-bys that run under that to tie it all together. 1-bys aren't substantial enough to do any good for this, so on this end of this pallet, I'm going to have 2-bys under this. So I want this to be level, so to maintain that height, I've got these 2x4 blocks that are going to go back here where I can't have something under it. So I've cut a bunch of 2x4 treated lumber into sections 4 inches long for spacers to hold this up. That works out really well because that's going to give me a 5-inch height. That 5-inch height is the same as the 5 inches here. This is actually 4 3/4. So I can put a support on top of this that runs across and holds this down. Now that one will have to be easily removed because when you actually drive the backhoe on or the tractor on, you'll slide that support out. That also, at 5-inch height, will slide under here for a support because that is 7 inches high. So I can put a 2x4 across this, or I might use two 4x4s under there, or on top of this I can use a 2x4 and get the height for a support under that section of the backhoe. So the majority of this is going to be held together with either 1/2-inch lag bolts or these 1/2-inch carriage bolts, depending on whether there's access to put a nut behind it. But for these right here, I should be able to just put them in with some deck screws. I established the width at the front. Now I'm going to establish that same width back here. I determined that off of a 10-inch spacing from the backhoe subframe. So I've cut these two 10-inch boards. I'm going to stick those in between. Make sure this is the 10-inch direction. I didn't turn it the other way. Yeah, that's 10 inches right there. On both sides, I've got this 10-inch spacer, and then clamp to it. Now I know that these legs are running straight. So I could run a 2x4 across right here. Maybe a 2x6 would fit in there, but at least a 2x4 could run right across there, and the support would be exactly where I want it under this frame. But a 2x4 turned on its side gives you very little strength. So I'm going to put another 4x4 with 2x4 legs under it, exactly like this rail here. I'm going to put another one across this way, and that will give us the extra strength we need, and then I'll put the 2x6 on it. So I'm going to attach this to here with lag screws, but until I go get some, I'm just going to use these deck screws. So that's the only thing on my list from the store right now is lag screws. So I screwed those down from the top, but in case I want to move this before I make it over to get the lag screws, I'm going to put L brackets inside of here to tie it together a little bit more. Alright, so now I need to build the support for the bucket. So this support's going to be made with a 4x4 running across here. So the bottom of the 4x4 is at 15 3/4. Let's see how much it moves when I let this down. Now it's at 14 3/4. So I'm going to build this at 15 inches. And then from here, we have 5 inches. So we need some 10-inch verticals off of this to support this, all made out of 4x4s. Alright, same thing I said on the last part. I want to build this with lag screws coming through the end. But I only want to make one trip to the store. I'm 30 minutes from the nearest hardware store. So I'm going to build this and have it held together with L brackets. So I won't try to move this till I have it put together right with the lag bolts. Alright, now we need some cross braces running across the top here for the forks to go under and lift. Alright, so the next thing I'm thinking about is more support for the forks. And I said I'll probably mainly use the 46 or 42 inch forks, but I want to make sure that if I use 36 inch forks, they're going to reach far back enough to get good support here. After I take the backhoe off of here, I'm going to stand this up and add more supports along the bottom. Alright, so I've established now that this can't drop. Now I need to set it so that it can't swing back, which I think is going to be a lot less of a problem. Looks like I'm going to put post right behind this. Leave a little space so I'm not running this into the post, but put post right here so that the bucket can't swing back anymore. So it looks like those need to be about 18 inches tall. I'm going to put L brackets here, and then on this side. And anywhere that I'm putting an L bracket right now, I'm going to come back with the lag screw, run a lag screw through here and through the bottom. We use L brackets for the product we manufacture in here, so I've got thousands of these and I get them on, you know, bulk pricing, so I don't mind using a few of them up. Alright, so I think I've already made it clear I'm making this up as I go. But there's a piece of 2x6 exactly the width of this right here that I can use to keep these from bowing in and out. So I'll throw that on there. Now I'm going to use a little bit of redneck engineering to keep these tied in this way. The way I'm going to do that, I'm going to screw this board into here, but I'm going to notch this so that it drops down and this can't pull that direction. Alright, so that'll work until I get some better hardware. Alright, so no doubt about it, what I've built right now would make a decent stand to drive it back in, set it on, and leave it until you need it again. But that's not what I'm trying to build. So, got a couple more steps to make sure I'll be able to lift it. Because right now there's nothing under this frame to cause it to go up. We're lifting the back side when we pick it up, but it can still tip this way. This board right here will be removable. I'm just going to put stake pockets right here that can slide in and out, because obviously you can't back the tractor into it with that in there. Alright, so now I've got this. I can pull that pin, take this out when I'm wanting to transport, just put it back in. Got the same pin on the other side. I think I'm ready to take the backhoe off this frame, finish solidifying the frame with the lag bolts, and put one more brace under here that's going to lift the back portion whenever I pick it up with the forks. So I'm just going to mark right here. I want that other support right here. I've also taken some measurements and realized I left these sticking out too far. We've only got 14 inches between this cutout right here and the back tires, and this is about 18 inches. So once I get this out and stand it up, I'll cut this off here and then reattach these supports right under there. Anyone want to put a guess in the comments about whether or not this is going to work the first time I try it? So the first test will just be lifting the loader off of the backhoe frame and see if it moves. I mean, if it does, I might as well hang them up, because that's the easy part, is getting it to not tilt. So if I didn't accomplish that, the whole thing's a wash. Alright, so we crossed the first little hurdle. Now let's finish this thing up and go for the bigger prize of being able to actually carry it with this. We'll put some more screws into these legs right here. Alright, so we used a 2x12 here to give us support for the forks. We'll put another 2x12 under to support the forks from tipping the other way. It's kind of crazy the way this is working out. When I woke up this morning, I had no plan at all that I was ever going to build something like this. Just popped into my head to do it. thought, well, I'll see how far I can get on the lumber I have. And it's done. I'd still like to go get those lag screws and make it a little bit stronger long term. But I think it's strong enough the way I've done it to carry the backhoe. I used every stick of wood I have, and it's done. The only thing I would still like to do is put a front board that stops the forks from coming in too far. And I'm going to use these just random scrap pieces of plywood for that and replace them later with a treated 2x. But it's pretty cool if it works. If it doesn't work, it's, you know, not quite as impressive that I was able to do it. So. You know, if I'm being honest, I'm really surprised at how well this is working. As soon as I got it done, I thought, well, this is probably like a rough draft and it's not going to work for some reason and I'll have to kind of redo it or modify it. I drove on, picked it up, drove off, drove back on, set it back down. No problem whatsoever. I've drove around with it, lifted it up in the air, I've went around corners. I went downhill, I went uphill, it's not tried to fall off. I was assuming I would at least have to put a strap around it, but it's just kind of leveraged in between this and here and all the weight being on this, and it's just locked in, it's not going anywhere. And now, you know, I thought about putting my brush hog on the lower level because it's kind of shorter and then putting this on a shelf up above it, and now I can do that. If I have to leave it in the yard, I can move it to mow. If I want to put it in the shed, but I've got stuff behind it, I can move it around. And just gives me more options. And that's what I'm all about, is options and flexibility. And I'm trying to be as organized as I possibly can. So I think this is a nice upgrade. I'm going to do the exact same thing for the stump grinder. And I've got a new attachment that I've ordered and I haven't even talked about on the channel yet. And it'll probably be set up like this too. So I appreciate you taking time to watch this video. In just a minute, you'll see links on the screen to a couple more of our videos, and I'll see you next time.